here's how I want to do this tonight. Of course, this is your meeting, but I do have to take a chunk of it to explain to you why we're even here, and introduce my staff, of course, and I have members from the law enforcement community here that I believe also need to get up and address you all. And so what I want to start off with is, after I go through that, I want to give a status where the district attorney's office has been the last couple of years, at least here in Colfax, and where we've been at least through 2014, where we're at in the present, to this date. I'm going to highlight some areas that I think are positive, some areas that are not so positive, and I think a lot of you are here because of the not so positive. The good thing about it is that the not so positive days, I believe, are behind us. I've got a good staff, and stability is the key. I'll talk a little bit more about that. I'm going to go over some numbers. I'm going to tell you what our case management system tells us. And what I'm going to do, because this is very exhaustive work for my staff, I'm going to tell you what we've done, how we've come about it, and then the actual results, I am going to post those on the DA's webpage, and I don't know if maybe the Raton PD's website can host that also. We'll talk about that. So if you want to go down individual names and numbers and stuff, I think that's the best way to do, because quite frankly, for me to print off stacks of paper, it's just, that's tax dollars. I don't want to do that because there are ways to do it. If you don't have access to the internet or any of that stuff and you do want a hard copy, well, then go ahead and make a request. I have to say this, though, on some cases that we do have that are either investigative stages or certain things, I cannot be public about it. Most everything else I can be public about. The law says that once charges are formally filed, then it becomes public record. If they're not formally filed, if I'm working a case with Chief Garcia or his guys and it's investigatory only, I cannot share that information with anyone. And I think the press knows that very well, because they call me all the time wanting information on this or that, and I can't give it to them unless charges are filed. So that's how I want to do about talking about the stats. Then I think what might be opportunistic at that time is to introduce law enforcement. They have the option to get up here and introduce themselves and either open it up to questions or comments from you, or just say, look, I'm here every day. You guys can come and visit me, and I know time's pretty precious, and we all don't want to be locked up in meetings. I'm not sure, but I had scheduled this or thought it wouldn't go past 9 o'clock. I hope it doesn't. I'm driving back tonight. I've got an appointment early in the morning in Taos, but if you need me here past 9, that's okay. I work for you, so we'll do that. What I want to start with first is introducing my staff, and if they will all come up here. I'm very proud of these folks. I want you to know that they work hard. They don't complain. They've been given a heck of a task, transitioning from a long-time prosecutor's office here that had some stability, that had their certain way of doing things, to transitioning over to a new system, new ways of doing things, and especially the technology side. So I'm very excited about it. And I'm going to start with Nadine Crosswhite is one of our legal secretaries, and she's, like I said, one of those unsung heroes. These are the folks, when we go to trial and whatever happens, guilty or not guilty, our success is just because of them. You never see them. They don't get the headlines, and you know what? They should, because we cannot try a case, we cannot pursue justice unless we have our staff. And then we have Diane Berry, and she's joined us recently also. She's another legal secretary. We have Lisa Wolf, who is our supervising secretary. And we have Reba Egbrecht. Did I say it right? Yeah. I've known her a long time, and I always mess that one up. Please pronounce it.
Egbrecht.
Egbrecht. All right. Sorry, folks. The way it's spelled and the way it's pronounced are different. Reba is our victim advocate, but Reba has also been very good and unselfish in helping out on the legal end. case management duties, whatever we've asked of her, she's done it. And that includes helping us with victims. And our newest additions, and I'm happy to have him here, this is Megan Hasser. And she joins us from Taos. Before that, she was, I can't recall now.
In Indianapolis.
Indianapolis. So are you rooting for the Colts?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Sorry, Broncos fans. I should have brought that up. Doing an excellent job here as one of our attorneys here. And then Tim Scheiderer, I stole him from Roswell. And of course, Raton is a lot nicer and prettier and friendlier and everything else. So that was some of the selling points. And again, they have inherited a heck of a task, and I'll explain that full in a little bit about how difficult it has been trying to piece together a caseload. But they're doing well. In fact, Megan just came back from representing us at the drug court, which she's been doing regularly. And I think what I'll do at this point, because I don't think that it's fair just to let them, if you guys want to say anything, that's cool.
Just happy to be here, happy to be serving you guys.
And you folks need to know that my assistants are me when I'm not here. I hire them to go into court, but I also hire them to be me when I'm not here. So if you need to visit them, if you need to talk to them, and I'm not here, because the fact is I don't live here, and the main office is not here. But I can be here when I need to be, and when I can't, that's what I have these fine folks for. Okay? Now, they are splitting the caseload, and I haven't given them, Daniel Romero, who's my chief deputy, who's a native of Cimarron, has worked with them, and they're dividing up the caseload. For example, I just finished a murder trial here a couple of weeks ago, back in December, and Tim co-chaired that with me. So the next homicide, which is the Anthony Garcia matter, is going to be Megan's, and he'll probably assist her. Now, don't be surprised if I come back and try another case or two, because I have tried cases in magistrate court and district court in this county. And I'm more than willing to come back and do them again if I need to. It's just not going to happen for the next 3 months because the legislature's in session. All right? Okay, so this is my staff, and I want you folks, if you see, especially Megan and Tim, be nice to them. I know you're going to, because that's the way Raton and Colfax County is, but we want them to stay. You know, we need them to stay. So, and I've been extra nice to them too, so I haven't yelled at them. All right. Now let's go, I'll talk to you a little bit about, and if you have any questions or concerns that come up about any of the individual duties, let me know. I'm going to take a few minutes and just go over the history. As you all know, we in this county benefited from having a longtime prosecutor, a veteran prosecutor, and someone that I respected for many years who had left the game. And when I got elected DA, I put on my knee pads and I begged her to come back and work, and she did. And there's good about that and there's not so good about that. The good about that is that she knew how to run a caseload. She knew how to try a case. And the bad about that is we knew she was going to retire. And, you know, I knew that was going to happen. I knew it was coming up. And so we made some steps to try and bring people in who could take over. And that's where things were not that great. After Leslie retired, I hired, I don't even know how many, 4 or 5 different people to come over and take over. And, you know, it didn't work out. There was one time where I advertised and I didn't get a single person wanting to come over and work in Raton. Well, we'll go to Taos. I go, well, they don't have an opening in Taos. I need you in Raton. Well, no, I don't think I'll go to Raton. So at the time I had an assistant, pretty new in Taos, and she approached me and said, you know, I'd like to go earn my stripes. I'll go to Raton and I'll run the office. And I said, okay, we'll support you as much as we can. And so she came over, and, you know, it just didn't work out very well. A lot of cases that had already been in trouble got in bigger trouble. She tried. I don't know that she was able to handle it, whatever reason. I think she finally just saw the writing on the wall and she left. I had an assistant also that was here at the same time, and, you know, there were some highlights, and then there were some things that were not so good. The numbers that I'll tell you about will illustrate that. So after she indicated that she wanted to go and leave, then I just fortunately had a couple of applicants. One of them was Megan, and Tim didn't necessarily apply, if I recall correctly. I think one of my assistants met him at a conference and kind of, you know, talked about us, and I think at the time in Roswell, he was ready for a career change in terms of handling more cases, different kind of cases. Because what some of you may not know is if you work in a big city prosecutor's office in Roswell compared to Ratona's big city, they have division. And if they stick you in DWIs, well, that's all you're going to do for 5 years. They stick you in juvenile, that's all you're going to do for 5 years. If they stick you in violent crimes, that's all you're going to do. And so I think Tim wanted to be able to handle a variety of cases, because the fact is, if you're a prosecutor here, you're going to handle everything from DWI up to first-degree murder. And being a younger and a less experienced attorney, I mean, you want to get those things done. You want to do those kind of things. So it's a good incentive to get in there. As soon as Megan and Tim got on board, we started seeing results fairly quickly. I did speak with Chief, I spoke with other law enforcement, even the judges who have complimented both Megan and Tim on being prompt, on showing up, on being professional, and conducting hearings. We'll see. They got trials coming up. They're going to do very well. I'm convinced of that. So that's kind of like the history. Let me give you some numbers to illustrate what it is that we're dealing with. And for the purposes of tonight, I'm just going to go back to 2014. I had a request to go back to 2013, and I'll do that. It's just not going to happen tonight. It just takes a lot more work for my staff. So let me tell you, the session keeps me pretty busy, the legislative session. So I'm thinking about April or May that I can, with the help of Mr. Berry and Chief and others, and I want to thank you guys for setting this up, but I would like to come back April or May and have a follow-up, and maybe I can report on what happened at the legislature and talk a little bit more about 2013. But we need a starting point. So let's go back to 2014. And I'm going to talk to you about what's called closed cases. Cases are closed for a number of reasons. I'll explain those. The way it typically happens is law enforcement will get called to a scene. They go and they investigate. Sometimes they need a search warrant, sometimes they need an arrest warrant, sometimes both. Sometimes they need other help. And my attorneys are usually on call. I'm on call. I've had law enforcement call me. I don't mind. I don't care what time it is. So once their investigation is put together, then it's brought to my office. My attorneys look at it, they assess the case, and sometimes they're going to say, you know what, officer, you need to go back and get a statement from this person. I noticed that they said that it was blunt force trauma. Did you notice anything in the area? Did you pick up, oh yeah, I picked up a rock and I just forgot to. Okay, let's get a supplemental report on that. Did you speak to the suspect? Well, no, because I thought he was going to lawyer up. Well, you don't know that. Go speak to the suspect. So there's follow-up that's done. And I think, you know, I'll speak for the chief with apologies, but having small, understaffed, and underpaid, really, law enforcement, it's hard to do follow-up because one of his officers who handled that case may be on vacation, may be on graveyard shift. It's a hard time coordinating that. And if you have maybe a big enough department where you can have investigators, someone that's just designated with doing that, that's how the big cities do it. We're not the big city. Our finances aren't the greatest. We wish they were. But those are the facts. So sometimes Officer John Doe It's not gonna get me my follow-up for 2 or 3 weeks. That's a fact. And sometimes it goes longer, sometimes it's shorter. I'm not saying that's a rule. There's some officers that they're able to get it done right away. So now the victims are mad because we're not filing charges. And, you know, sometimes other people get mad. But once everything's brought in, or as much as we think we need, then we file charges, unless the officer has already filed the charges. From there, it becomes a matter of getting it set for jury trial. And that kicks in my staff who opens the case, who puts all the paperwork together. Right now, one of the things that we are doing is electronic. We are a paperless office, not 100%, but most of it. And so the goal is to be able to go to court with one of these little laptops or little tablets and be able to try our whole case from there. Right now, I can look up cases on there. There's a couple of things we're trying to work out, like the media, audio and the visual, but, you know, we got our administrative offices working on that. So we've modernized in the office. And then we get our defense attorneys, they enter, they file motions, we fight the motions, the judge decides. And the great majority of the time, we do what's called the plea bargain. And people think that's a bad word. Well, what it is more of a plea agreement. The state gets something, the defense gets something. I'll tell you this, if we had to try every single case, it just won't happen. The system would break. Judges can't do it. Juries, no, you can't call that many juries. Police officers, every day in court, that means they're not on the streets protecting your neighborhoods. And so a lot of what we do is plea agreements, plea bargains, if you want. And so the few cases where we can't reach an agreement, they go to trial. And you've seen those. You've seen Leslie try those cases. We tried one, like I said, in December. That was a murder case. The defendant wanted me to plea bargain, him lied, and I didn't want to do it, so we let a jury decide, and they did. And that's the way our system works. So that's kind of just how we, and it's a real brief nutshell. I'm trying to be real good with time here. And then we have codes. When we close out cases, we have codes. There's different reasons why cases get closed. One of them is the prosecution decline. And why we decline cases sometimes is because there's just not enough evidence. We decline it sometimes because law enforcement has requested it. And they'll do that on occasion because maybe one of their officers transfers out. We've had it where officers have gone to Afghanistan or to Iraq. We've had it where the officers will request it because sometimes there's an internal. And the chief knows this very well. There could be an internal on a certain officer, and it's just not an officer that you want to put on the stand with a defense attorney who knows all about it. It's just not worth it. The other times we decline it is when victims themselves come in. Now this happens quite a bit, and so, you know, you go over to your neighbor's house and steal her lawnmower, and she tells the cops, and here I am filing charges. Well, in the meantime, you know, you and her talk, you give her back her lawnmower, and you go fix her back fence or whatever it is, and she doesn't want to pursue it anymore. So she says, you know what, he's not a crook, he just did a bad thing, but we're friends now. So why do I want to tag you with a felony? Why do I want to ruin your life over that? She knows it, so I'll decline. And then, especially in domestic violence cases, this is the toughest one. And usually it's women, but where the woman gets beat up or harassed or assaulted, and then she realizes that this is the breadwinner. Or there's the honeymoon period where the guy says, well, honey, I'm going to be in trouble, we need to work it out. And they work it out. She comes in and she talks to Reba, and she wants to sign what's called a non-prosecution affidavit. And, you know, it's tough because the research has shown time and again that they don't necessarily break that cycle on their own without court intervention. Some years back, the Supreme Court decided a case called Crawford versus Washington. And when I first started in this game, I used to take the person to court regardless if there was enough evidence there and it looked like there was a history of battering, it was a severe case. I would disregard what the victim wanted because I was thinking of the public good, and then that victim would refuse to testify. But Crawford and I could get evidence in through what was called hearsay or other things. Crawford versus Washington says you have to put that person on the stand. So if I don't have that person on the stand, I don't have a case. It's gotten a lot tougher for us now. And we've spent time trying to convince, the victims, you know what, you're not just doing this for you, but you are in a sense doing it for him, because if you can break that cycle, that makes him a healthier, more productive person down the line. So those are examples of declining. There's a dismissal, which a court will dismiss a case. Let's say the defense attorney comes in and says, the police violated my client's rights because they didn't read him Miranda, or they violated my client's rights because they didn't do this or do that. And then we argue, well, no, this is what's going on, and the judge could dismiss it and say, no, it's dismissed. Other reasons that I've seen judges dismiss, and it's their courtroom, but sometimes the prosecutor will show up late. He'll be in one of those moods, or she'll be in one of those moods and say, I'm dismissing. Another reason why sometimes we see dismissals is because the officers don't show. And it's not necessarily the officers that they didn't want to show, it's because there's other things pulling them in different directions. And then we have to look at the priorities of that case. Is that a case that's really, important in a lot of ways? They're all important, but then we decide whether we either refile it or it stays dismissed. There's dismissals pursuant to plea agreements, and that's, like I said earlier on, we've arrived at, for example, we've had cases where somebody steals money from you and then steals money from her, and we file charges on both. Well, this person decides, I want to do good. I'm tired of this. I don't want to be a thief anymore. Pays both of you off. So we'll do a plea agreement in your case, and part of that plea agreement is we dismiss her case. She gets her money. And so that's another one thing of how we do that. There's what's called a noli prosequi, which is Latin for I'm not prosecuting. And that's basically the prosecutor saying, this is going to be the crux, I guess, in a lot of ways of what I want to talk tonight, because there were a lot of noli prosequis that were filed. And we are in the process of going through those and trying to find out exactly why they were filed and what can be done about that. There's some other stuff like no bill, which means we go to preliminary hearing. In New Mexico, if you commit a felony, the only way you can be tried as a felony is if on a showing of probable cause, and that could be to a grand jury or to a judge, magistrate judge usually. And we go in and we put our officer on the stand, we give the evidence, and all we have to show is probable cause. But sometimes the judge says, well, it's not there, or the grand jury says it's not there. That's called a no bill. So that also factors in. There are other things that you don't see a lot, but we do see them. We're seeing a whole lot more, unfortunately. Mental illness. There's competency that's raised. If our defense attorney says, my client doesn't understand me, he doesn't know what's going on, I can't explain it to him, they raise competency, we get an evaluation done. If it looks like this person is suffering from a mental illness that cannot be cured, or it's going to take a while, sometimes we'll just dismiss the case. We can either move it to the civil side, which means getting a commitment to Las Vegas, or sometimes we just dismiss it. And I know at the legislature they're still wrestling with how are we going to handle this. You folks have seen the headlines in the news for a long time now, and a lot of police shootings and other shootings have been people that have been suffering from mental illness, suicide by cop, those kind of things. There could also be things such as the evidence suppressed by the court. That's another motion that the defense files. Maybe the identification of the defendant wasn't that good. There could be other things such as, one that I'll talk about a little bit more is like time limits. And that's one where we really got in a lot of trouble, the last year or so, and especially on probation type hearings. But those are examples. In 2014, we closed 460 cases. And bear this in mind, that was mostly with only having one attorney in the office. There was hardly a time when we had a long-term stretch where there were two attorneys in the office. Yes, we were sending people from Taos. We were had some support from Clayton, but only one person in the office. Of that, 240 of those resulted in convictions. And what's more problematic, and what we're going to spend some time getting into, is 220 of those cases were either dismissed, declined, noli prosecco, like I indicated earlier, or what would be called a no bill. Okay? To break that down further, there was, let me get this tab down. 142 cases that fit the category of noli prosecco, which means the prosecution. Of that, we have looked at the stats. The largest numbers are insufficient evidence, 43 cases. Lack of jurisdiction or venue, 11. Prosecutor dismissed or declined because there was a reason there. We're going to look into that, 11. And victim or witness uncooperative of 36. Now, there were other reasons for, and they were small, like accused mentally incompetent, 1. Age of the case, 5. Some of the cases, language just too long. But the reason I bring this up is because of those 43, 11, 11, and 36. We are in the process of going back and looking at those cases. And we're going to look at why they were dismissed and whether they stayed dismissed. I can tell you that we have already refiled uh, 20 cases we have refiled. So off that number, we have already gone back and reviewed them. And there's another couple that, there's a few more, 6 more. Let's see, refiled. 6 of those had already been refiled, and they have since been closed because they have been adjudicated. Probation, 1 was closed out because of insufficient evidence. 1 closed out because of a competency issue. 1 was a time limits expired, and the last one was pretty much a mistake on one of my prosecutor's part. Was he had thought the time limits had expired. It was a felony in magistrate court, and he mistakenly dismissed. That one's going to get refiled. I'm not worried about that. So I know I'm talking just raw numbers here, but like I say, we'll try and post those on the website. But you need to know that at least that number that I said have been dismissed, we are committed to going back and going through the ones that are questionable, and we're going to see what we can. We've already got 26 cases out of that we know have been dealt with. And I've spotted a couple just today looking at them. I'll be staffing with my assistants about that. There was 7 cases that were dismissed by the judge. Of course, one was the incompetent, a defendant was not competent. And then we have 1 officer failed to appear. That does happen. 1 time limits where it had expired. 2 where the time limits had expired, sorry. And then we have a couple that our stats just say judge dismissed because I think at least one of those was where the prosecutor may have showed up late. Now, when a judge dismisses cases, there's 2 things they can do. Number 1 is they dismiss, it's called without prejudice. That means I can refile. Or they can dismiss with prejudice. That means I can't come back and file. Now, at least one of the cases, the magistrate judge, it was a felony case. The magistrate judge filed or dismissed with prejudice, and that's not legally correct. So we're going to refile that one regardless of what the magistrate judge did. So that takes care of one of those. The other tab that we've gone over is cases that were declined. And as I said earlier on, cases can be declined for a number of reasons. Insufficient evidence, conduct wasn't criminal. Sometimes it's a crime where we have to prove intent. Maybe we can't prove intent. Maybe identification was off. Maybe someone comes in with an alibi. Says, oh, it couldn't have been me. Here's my ticket from the Super Bowl or, wherever I was on that particular date. So the other one we're going to look at is declined cases. And of course, I think one of the reasons why we're here especially is those cases involving controlled substances, burglaries and controlled substances. So I'm gonna highlight those. There's aggravated burglary, criminal damage to property. Whether you guys know it or not, but we're also charged with enforcing compulsory attendance, tardiness at school. So we do have a few cases on that. Fraud, aggravated battery. So those 67, like I said, again, I'll post those. We will look at that. One of the things tonight is, those of you who have a particular case that you are concerned about, what I would ask you to do is make sure that Lisa gets to you, and maybe we can do this afterwards or whatever. You can raise your hand. I've got an intake sheet. If you're willing to do it, please put down your name, give me a phone number or an email, and then the specific case or comment or question you want answered if I can't get to that tonight, or if you don't want to discuss it in public. And what I will do is take those back and do our darndest to get our answer for you so that we can call you up or email you and let you know exactly what it is you want to know. If we can't let you know, we will give her a reason why not, okay? Again, we've listed 29 cases that are pending, that we know they're pending to be refiled. So that's in addition to what we've already refiled. So that takes us up over 40 cases, 50 cases, and we'll keep going from there. A lot of those cases we may not be able to, and I'm not gonna hide anything on that. If I can't do it, I'm gonna let you know that. I think that's kind of a nutshell. I did have the case management system we have, there's certain things that can be done fairly easy by my tech people and other things that take a little while. But I did ask my tech person about getting stats for 2013, and that's why I told you that's gonna be another day. But there are some numbers that she could run, and in 2013, there was 404 cases that were closed out. Of that, 302 were convictions. 102 were either declined, dismissed, and those are the kind of numbers that are more consistent with what a prosecutor's office should be doing. That's kind of, in a sense, a goal, but of course we want to exceed that at all times. Now, there are some things that people in the public sometimes maybe don't grasp fully, and I'm happy that law enforcement is here because they'll tell you themselves that a good quality prosecution, whether it's by trial or plea, is dependent on a good investigation. And this is critical because those of you folks who are here, I know you're concerned about the community. I am. But we have to support our police. We have to support them any way we can. We have to. I've got policymakers here. It's so good to see that. And I know the resources are thin, but I'm going to make my pitch. Whenever the opportunity is there, please try to get resources for our officers, because the crooks are getting smarter, they're getting better armed, and there are a heck of a lot more of them. I think you all heard about the epidemic with painkillers. Painkillers seems to be more of an issue in Taos. Ours is meth here. Meth is growing in Taos. Heroin is growing in Taos, but meth has always been a problem in Union and in Colfax. Now, meth, just a few years ago, was usually mom and pop stuff. It was the cookers, people that were cooking locally and then supplying it. But we have such an influx of what we call Mexican meth because it's from the super labs in Mexico. Some of you may not know, but the reason why mom and pop labs have dwindled, they're still out there, is because the state did like some other states and decided to regulate pseudoephedrine. There is no such regulation in Mexico. And they call them super labs because they get pseudoephedrine by the ton. And they're making meth, and they've got the distribution routes. I-25 is one of the biggest. So we have that going on. How can we interdict? It's a tough thing. The feds, their presence has been cut. The drug task forces that we used to have, such as Region 4, they've been cut. I don't know if they're going to get restored. I've done a lot of work on the national level, and we've pushed and pushed, but you all know what the politics have been like on the national level. And there's just no desire in Washington to spend money on programs. It's just not there. We have good representation in New Mexico. They're all committed, but there's political realities too. We meet with them every year. We're on the phone with them. We talk to them. So what can we do? And maybe I'll save that for later, but do you have any questions about the numbers, the cases, or anything that I've told you so far? Yes, ma'am.
Didn't you have an investigator in your office at one point?
I did. Thanks for bringing that up. There's another issue that's happening. Clay Moore was, well, as you know, Jay Ratliff was an investigator some years back, and his wife got a really good job in Rio Rancho, and so he went with the wife, and he works for the Attorney General's office, doing a really good job there in the child abuse or exploitation. We've worked a few cases with him, and this is mostly the people that are surfing the internet and into child porn, and he's done a really good bang-up job with them. We miss him, but we were fortunate to get Clay Moore, and Clay Moore's last day was just last week, I think, and he's moving on to the sheriff's office. So next week on the 22nd, I will be here in Raton interviewing candidates for the investigator position. I hope to have someone hired within the next couple of weeks. And an investigator is critical to our office because that's a liaison between us and law enforcement. Helps a lot with the follow-up. So for example, if one of chiefs or the sheriff's guys can't get the paperwork to me on time, sometimes we'll have our investigator help. Sometimes they can't get the stuff to the crime lab, and I think, you know, if the chief wants to talk about it later on, I will tell you that looking at our stats, there's at least 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I'm looking at least 6 or 7, no, actually more, about 10 cases where we're still waiting results from the crime lab. The crime lab is understaffed. And that's not just testing the drugs. Because when we test the drugs and they come out to be cocaine or methamphetamine, and now all of a sudden we're going to court, our defense attorney, you know, subpoenas that analyst for a statement or something, they're not available. Or we're going to trial, I subpoena the analyst, they're not available because they're testifying in Farmington. I mean, sometimes I'm at the end of the time limits. I can try and get a continuance from the judge. Judges are pretty good about it for the most part, but sometimes they're just fed up and they'll say, sorry, you had enough time, I can't help what's going on in Farmington or in Santa Fe, and I'm dismissing this case. And that'll bring another area where I'm going to suggest that we can all help together. But, yes, sir.
I don't legally ask you not to, we should help the law enforcement when they cannot be held accountable for their actions of being involved in criminal activities, falsifying documents, destroying documents. I believe they ought to have, responsible, just like a criminal is, and I feel that you guys should be getting involved in making sure that they're answering for their criminal activities that they're doing as long as the criminals in the street.
Let me just say this about that, and if you have some specific examples, maybe what I'll do is it okay after I hire my investigator that you come and meet with him? Is that okay?
You got anytime you want.
But I'm just asking if you can give me a couple of weeks, and then we can, and then you can let us know what exactly is going on there. I mean, we've seen what's happening in Albuquerque. There is a national thing, and you know, police officers are in the spotlight. And
Accountable for their actions, you
what
simply
if-
destroy a person's life and get away with it, you can't do nothing, and then they come back and tell you that you can't do nothing. Oh, my certification weren't going to your family or whatever,
Mhm.
and yap about it, and get away with it. They ought to have to be held accountable for their actions, instead of destroying our lives and making the person lose everything they got because they can't afford to keep going on. And I feel that the district attorney's office should be involved along with it, prosecuting them and making them answer for their mistakes.
Okay, that's a fair comment. You know, I'm not gonna, police officers, just like DAs and everyone else, defense attorneys should be held to the same standards. I agree with that. The thing is, we have to,
All they're doing is internal investigations, and it's a hush-hush deal. I mean,
well,
that's
yeah.
not the law.
yes and no, but you know, let's, like I say, so that we don't, I understand your comment and your area, so if you want to maybe give your name and number to Lisa, and then once we'll sit down and talk about it further, okay? But I'd certainly agree. I'd say I'm held to the same standard myself, doesn't matter. I'm a DA. Heck, if I break the law, I should be held to that. And I believe that's different. So I do agree with you with that. By the same token, I'm a very big fan of the police because we need them. Our system is created by people and it's run by people, so it's not always going to be perfect. Now,
Somebody where they're the biggest criminal and the criminal that you're putting behind
well,
bars.
it does happen. I just can't imagine a society without police officers. I can't. I don't want to. And yes, you're going to get some bad apples here and there, just like you're going to get bad apple prosecutors and defense attorneys and judges. But the system eventually does work its way out. I'm a believer in that.
Now, there's, so you can prove me wrong, I'm not a believer in our system at all.
Sure.
I can say wrong for you, but
Yeah, and I wouldn't, and I'm not going to take more time with it, but I wouldn't want to prove you wrong. I have no business proving you wrong. That's your opinion, you're entitled to it, and we'll just go from there. But I am interested in hearing if you have some specific instances, so we'll set that up, okay? Anybody else? Yes, sir.
Mr. Gallegos, one of the comments you made there, what is your status before the State Judiciary Committee? I know you can't discuss it. Are they still in the process of doing an investigation, or have you been released from that?
No, you guys understand the question? I guess you've probably seen the headlines or whatever it is, but the DA gets charged with misconduct. Well, you know, lawyers are supposed to police themselves, they say, or we police each other. And there was a burglary that happened, a strong-arm robbery in Taos. And we had information that certain individuals may be involved. So the detective came to see us, and he said, I got my informant, or my information is that these people were texting each other, or they were calling each other, and I want to see if I can coordinate that so that we can get a search warrant or make an arrest. But even more importantly, I want to see if that's exactly what happened, the detective says. So if it's not them, I can just ignore them and go on to somebody else. Well, we couldn't find a judge at the time. We wanted to get subpoena. We called up Verizon, and they said, well, get us a subpoena. My deputy did the research, found out, number one, that, and you guys may know this, you remember the old days when you used to call directory assistants and say, I need the number for Ron Chavez, and they'd give it to you. The Supreme Court has said that there is not a privacy interest in that number. It's a third-party subscriber number. We pulled the Supreme Court case. My deputy did the research, brought it to me, and said there's not a privacy interest. There is in the conversation. You can't go after the conversation or the text. But in the number itself, there's not. So then the next question was, well, do we have the authority to issue that subpoena? And we went to our statutes and our rules, and we determined that we did. So that's what we did. Defense didn't like it, so he filed a motion. The judge agreed with the defense. Then the defense decided they would file a complaint against me for ethical misconduct. Well, it's like anything else. It's an accusation. If I accuse you of stealing my lawnmower, I've got to prove it, right? So now they're in the process of proving exactly what that is. We have a hearing set for the 11th or the 10th. I've got lawyers. They're going to hassle it out. Now, here's what could happen. Now, the case could go away. They could say there's no ethical conduct here because it was a legal matter. The appellate courts are going to look at it. They'll decide whether it was correct or not. And I'll say this, that every day lawyers do that. Defense attorneys do that all the time. They interpret laws, they interpret statutes, they interpret case laws, and they represent it to the judge. Now, should they be charged with misconduct? I've never filed against one. I won't either, not for that. But this is a different time. This disciplinary council is, has decided to pursue it. And there's 3 people that will hear the case, and they'll decide whether I committed misconduct or not. If they decide I committed misconduct, there could be a range of punishments, if you will, from a censure, which means they'll scold me publicly and say, don't do it again. They could put me on probation. They could say you need to do this or whatever. They could suspend my license for a period of time, or they could take my license completely. Now, in all the cases that have ever happened in New Mexico, the only people that have ever lost their license is because they're sleeping with clients, because they're taking money, because they have falsified or fabricated evidence, because they have failed to disclose evidence, or they have been convicted of a felony. None of that applies to me. So I'll go to the hearing, and I'm pretty sure I'll be your DA for the next 2 years.
But did the judge in that case rule that the subpoenas were illegally issued? Did you, being the district attorney for the district, have you sat down with your attorney and discussed what the judge's rulings was on that?
Well, there's two things happening. First of all, judges aren't always correct. I mean, I'll take a show of hands. Do you guys think judges are correct 100% of the time? No, because our appellate courts are full of cases where judges get flipped all the time. And we've appealed that case. We believe the judge is incorrect in his ruling. But it's going to be up to a higher court to say yes or no. But that's a different matter than what's going on with the misconduct stuff. That's the ethical violations. And my lawyers have looked at it. The lawyer handling the appeal for the Attorney General is very confident in our case. Doesn't mean it's going to go our way. He's just very confident that we have a good presentable case. I'll say this. This is what you need to understand. When that burglary, that robbery took place, it was of the electrical co-op. Money was taken that taxpayers had given to pay their bills. And I don't care what crime it is. If I'm asked to be aggressive again and do those things again, I will. I'm not crossing ethical guidelines. If I get in trouble for it, I get in trouble for it. But that's what I got elected to do. That needs to be very clear. And if they want to take my license or do something for that, I did it because I was trying to help the victims and trying to get money back. I'll stand proud on that note any day. Okay. Yes, sir.
A follow-up on that question. You and I have gone, excuse me, my name is Robert Gonzalez. You and I have gone round and round about the $20,000 that was missing from the sheriff's office here several years ago.
Yeah.
I wrote you a letter and you wrote me back stating that the money that was missing or taken was not the public money, it was forfeiture money, therefore there wasn't anything we could do. Also, we were insured by risk management. That money belonged to the county of Colfax, okay? It is the responsibility not only of you, but the sheriff at the time. Whenever you're elected, you look into, or when you're running for election, you look into what the qualifications or what the office is all about. Therefore, whenever you won election, you are the head of that office, the sheriff is the head of the office. Anything that happens in that office is your responsibility, not the assistant district attorney's. It's your responsibility, it's the sheriff's responsibility. In this case, the money was missing, an investigation came in. Nobody could find out how it was missing. There's several variations that the door could be open anytime. But it was the sheriff's responsibility. It was in the evidence locker room that supposedly they had. If he could not hold evidence in there, and this is just the one case, 20,000 was missing, some narcotics that went back out in the street, went out there, and yet the sheriff was not held accountable for his actions. If he felt that the evidence locker was not safe, he should have gone to the county commissioners and said, listen, I'm responsible for this evidence. I have an evidence room that I can't hold evidence in. Put it on their shoulders to get a new evidence room or a safer thing on it. But it is his responsibility for that money that was missing. The county is out 20,000. I realize we're insured by risk management, but we pay into risk management. Why didn't you advise the commissioners or where file a claim through risk management? Right now, the county budget or city budget, $20,000 is a lot of money. But yet we say, no, we can't do this, we can't do that. Which brings me to the point, if this is considered not public money, you're giving these officers here the right to stop anybody, and if they have money from drugs or stuff like this, you're giving them the right to say, okay, I stopped that vehicle, that money belongs to me, since you can't prosecute. Is that what we're telling these officers? They risk their lives every day that they step out there. They're more susceptible to being shot at than what you are or your assistants are in the office. These guys are out there, whether it's a felony, misdemeanor, they do not know. They do not know where they're going to stop that next vehicle, what's going to happen there. Okay? We need to know from the district attorney's office why, and I agree with Mr. Montoya there, okay? Why are you're not going forward and just simple things like this? And like I said, I'm aggravated. $20,000 is a lot of money. It could go to help the city or the county, the state, or what have you. You know, they risk their lives, and you risk your life too, I understand that. But $20,000, like I say, give these guys an initiative to go out and stop on the interstate a guy that's got $50,000, it's his, put it in your pocket. Maybe that'd be some kind of reward. And like I say, I don't understand it. And bringing back them other evidence that were inside that room, what was missing? Do you know as your office that you're going to prosecute a case and the evidence is missing? What's to say somebody didn't put the evidence in there? This was the sheriff's responsibility. He is responsible whether a deputy did it or not, or a state policeman. He was the custodial of that evidence. And what happened to them other cases? Did you successfully prosecute them without the defense attorney coming up and saying, hey, listen, the case may have been tampered with? And like I say, I think it's your responsibility, and I still think to this day, it's your responsibility to either sue the ex-sheriff civilly to get that money back, because he is responsible. $20,000, I just get frustrated, and I want you guys to know, you know, are you giving these guys the permission to go out there and get that money and put it in their pocket?
Okay, yeah, we have gone around quite a few, and I respect Mr. Gonzalez. I've not agreed with him, and I've agreed with him. I mean, and that'll probably continue, and we'll have a conversation one day, him and I, about something other than that $20,000, and it'll be fine. Let me answer the last question first. I've spoken with the chief, I've spoken with the sheriff, and I spoke with the lieutenant before he retired at state police. But I have told them that if they do seize monies that are the fruits of drug trafficking, that I will forfeit that for them. I'm more than happy to do that because those resources can go to help their departments. They know that. I have a commitment. I have a record of doing it. We're doing it in Taos. There's no reason why we can't do it here. Let me get to that. And those of you who aren't familiar, there was some years back, monies that was missing from the evidence locker. And the reason Mr. Gonzalez and I disagree on the nature of the funds is not because I'm upset that the money's gone myself. But there's a difference between taxpayer money and money that is forfeitures. The money was sitting, it was not subject to forfeitures because no forfeiture had been filed. Therefore, had that person been convicted, guess what would have happened to the money? It would have been destroyed. The procedure for filing on forfeitures is very, very clear, and you have to do it a certain way. That wasn't done, so the most that $20,000 was evidence of a crime. And had that case gone on, I don't remember what happened to it, but Leslie reviewed it. She went through it. She went through it with a fine-tooth comb. I looked at it. I reviewed what she went through. And the problem we had to this day, I've told you that then, is I need a suspect. There, to this day, you find me somebody that says deputy so-or-so or staff so-and-so or John Doe took that money, I promise you right now I will prosecute them. It just has not materialized.
What's the purpose of having policies and procedures if they need to follow their own?
Look, and that's something that I need to, and I'm going to be very blunt with you. I cannot and will not comment on what the policies and procedures were with the sheriff because that's not my department. I am considered by the Constitution to be the chief law enforcement official, but I don't run their offices. What I do is advise, I prosecute, I train. That's what that means. Now, I did not like their evidence procedures. I didn't like the one that was in Taos, and we went to them and had the same thing. We had paintings missing, we had money missing, we had drugs missing, but there was no evidence that any single person did it. If there is, and I'll tell you this again, I don't know what the statute of limitations will be at this point, and I'll repeat it. If somebody knows, and you can give that information to my office or some law enforcement, I'll be more than happy to do as Mr. Gonzalez suggested, and I will prosecute them, whether they're law enforcement or not. But I can only go with the investigation that's given to me. And the investigation says 20,000 missing, 10 people had access to that vault, or sometimes it wasn't locked or anything like that. You know, put yourselves in that shoes.
Yeah,
In,
but
in,
the
in,
fact is, the money was under his control. Physically, he's responsible for that. Why didn't you not go after him? I'm not saying criminally, but civilly. That's a theft.
I
Whether
don't
you
know.
who did it or not, it's a theft of money.
I don't know, and you asked me that, I don't know of a legal theory where I could. I researched it. I didn't find a legal theory where I could sue him. First of all, it's a county issue. I'm not sloughing it off on the county. The county wants that money back, have your attorney research whether they can sue him or not. I prosecute crimes.
But you also give advice to the county. Why didn't you tell them
I-
what is the option?
I used to give advice to the county. I'm not the county attorney anymore.
You're the district attorney.
Yes, in criminal matters. And, you know, I don't want to, folks, if you have an issue with this or something, call me, but I'm telling you, we tried to make a case. Leslie's not here, but she and Jay poured over that investigation. They interviewed, they did what they could. And again, my commitment to you, Mr. Gonzalez, is if we can make somebody, find somebody. I'm not going to charge somebody without evidence, then for sure I'll lose my license. I can't do that. That's not ethical. Yes?
Excuse me. So the money will still be missing.
Mm-hmm.
And you think that maybe in a year or so, somebody might come up and say, well, you know, that case, I know who did it,
Mm-hmm.
but the money's still missing. So then, in a year or so, when somebody comes forward and says, okay, this is, I know who did it, you will you'll prosecute them then.
If there's the evidence, yes.
But the money's still missing.
Well, you can
Isn't
prosecute.
that a crime?
You don't need the money to prove the case. You need circumstances that indicate that there was $20,000 at one time, now there's not $20,000. This is legal jargon, I'm sorry, it's boring, it's dry, but that's what the lawyers deal with. There have been cases where people have been prosecuted for murder and there was not a body found. That's called the corpus delicti, which is another one of those words they make us learn in law school. So yes, it can be done. It'll depend on who's saying it, their credibility, what kind of evidence they have, whether it's corroborated or not. But I'll tell you, it's at least a starting point. And why not? I wouldn't say no just because there's no money. Then I wouldn't be doing my job.
Well,
Okay?
there won't be any money. I'm
Of
sure.
course not. It's already in the casino or some drug dealer's hands or
Yeah,
something.
that's
Yeah.
it.
It's a big laugh that's just there.
Well, then what we'll do is we'll leave it at that. I respect your opinion. You have every right to be upset with me and consider it a big laugh. I'm sorry that that's the case. I don't consider it a big laugh, and I won't see it that way. But nevertheless, I still respect you, and I respect your fact to bring up that point and your ability to do so. I can say there probably are some DAs we've had in the past who probably would have never given you this opportunity. I'm not that.
If I understand you correctly, if someone, you got a tip that was able to present credible suspect and evidence to
Mhm.
that suspect, then it would be your job to investigate further, and you would do so. Is that
No.
what I'm hearing correctly?
What we would do is refer to an investigating agency.
Uh-huh.
My job is a prosecutor office.
Okay.
I do have an investigator, but primary investigation would be whoever jurisdiction it's in. Could be the sheriff, well, probably won't be the sheriff. It could be Raton would be asked to investigate it. It could be the criminal division of the state police. But very rarely will I have my investigator do the lead on that.
So this case would then need to have that tip would have to go back to Raton PD or the Cold
Or state
County
police.
Sheriff, or
Yeah.
state police.
Right off the top of my head, those are two. Now,
And
if
is-
here's another one. Since it potentially involves public corruption, if it is indeed, it could go to FBI. It could go to the feds. So that's another option.
And if your job for the state as the chief law enforcement official in terms of training,
Mhm.
does that charge your office also with making sure that the different law enforcement entities have a system to put out information about cases that, you know, people might provide evidence or tips for? It sounds like there's some concern in the population about this one particular thing. Is there a way that that concern becomes more than just one citizen's concern and can become known to a greater public.
You know, in this day and age of social media and stuff, certainly. You know, somebody finds, I mean, Mr. Gonzalez is more than welcome to create a site or do something and get people ginned up and say, we got to do this. And it's not going to change the outcome because I know what the request is. But through his getting in touch with the public, maybe someone will say, wait a minute, I was sitting in the restaurant and I heard this guy say, check this out. I got it while the sheriff wasn't even looking. Or I heard this about that. Those, and we'll talk about that in a bit about Crime Stoppers, those kind of tips are very invaluable to law enforcement. So, but it starts as a tip. It may not be hearsay if it's investigated aggressively and they can find, they could connect A to B, B to C, C to D. That's, almost every case starts with that. The chief will say, these guys will tell you, sometimes it's just a tip. Someone saying, I understand so-and-so took $20,000 and this is why I know it. I heard it from 3 people. Well, now they can track down the 3 people. And then they can go, and then they can go, and go. I'll say this, you guys have some really good law enforcement officers here. Some of the tops, I'll say that, and I've worked with a lot. And they're under a lot of pressure, and they get nothing but my full support. If they cross the line, then it's my job to straighten them, and I've done that before. Judges have done that before. Well, I'm standing by these guys. I've had to prosecute cops before. I understand, and that's your right as a citizen, and I do respect that. I may not agree with it.
According to the way the system's going right now, I don't have no rights.
Well, we're not going to.
Mr. Gallegos,
Yes.
you know, then, like Mr. Montoya said, but like the chief and sheriff's office, right now, you kind of like telling them, go right ahead, you know, if you get $20,000 out of the, don't be responsible for it.
I've never said that.
Don't be responsible for it.
Now I understand it.
No, I've never said that, nor would I say that. They know that my job is to advise them to do
Well, the
things
sheriff,
legally.
the sheriff, when he was, whoever was, didn't account for the 20,000 that was stolen.
You know, you
So-
guys, all I ask is, I would do my best to be respectful and fair to you. All I ask is the same thing. I wasn't running that office. All I can deal with is what someone brought to me in terms of evidence and stuff. I can't get inside the sheriff's head or the former sheriff or anybody else's head. The most I can do is tell you what I promised to do, and if something develops, I will pursue it. But, you know, continuing to beat the drum is not going to help any of us in here. I've heard you. I've heard you very clearly, and the only answer that I've given you is the only one that I can give.
I got one more statement. I filed I filed a lawsuit, never heard nothing in the paper, never heard nothing, never got sent to you. It's all hush-hush deal, you're doing in charge of an investigation. Destroy evidence, documents, give the officer 3 days off. Spank him in the hand, tell him, oh, it's okay, destroy that guy's life, it's okay. Nobody does that. I mean, I know you're gonna try, but hell, I'm gonna try too, but that's just a word, try, it don't mean nothing. I mean, as
Well,
far as I'm concerned, I've been through all this mess. They basically tell you, you ain't got no civil rights, you ain't got no constitutional rights. Well, I'm gonna tell you this, my mom's uncle was on the beaches of Normandy, my grandpa fought in World War II, my dad was in the Korean War, my uncle died in Vietnam, I had another first cousin that was a POW, missing in action, my cousin was a state police chief in Albuquerque, and you go try to do something with law enforcement or whatever to prove them wrong, and they admit to being wrong, and you have no rights, you can't do them.
Well, you know, sir, I don't know you. What I can tell you is your rights to me are as valuable as anybody else's out there.
They might be to you, but it ain't nothing
Well,
to them, 'cause
and towards that end, all I can say is, you know, I knew that tonight was going to present an opportunity for people to vent, and there's nothing wrong with that. What I don't want to see tonight is become a point where it's nothing but venting and we're not moving forward. Well, not necessarily that. He has, yeah, what I'm saying is, let's not turn it into an open debate at this point. I have committed to come back and have more meetings, and if you want individual, that's fine. What I want to do is tell you where we're at. I'm not holding back any punches here, but I can only talk about my office and where we're going to go from here forward. And I do want to give a few things about how we can help, because I know everybody here wants Raton and Colfax County to be safe, a healthy place to raise your children. We want economic development, and we want people to be able to grow old and retire and be able to be happy and live here. I want that because I have friends here, I have relatives here, and that's my goal. So, are there any other specific things that are not going to get into a big old debate? I'm happy. I never shy away from it. If not, we can go on to the next part. Yes, Patricia?
Donald, I'm just curious, because I know how hard it is to recruit and retain qualified staff. Do you feel like you're in a place now where or do you have vacancies still, so that you can move forward?
The only vacancy I have is the investigator. I have 4 candidates. I know all 4 of them. I'm fortunate that I know all 4 of them. I'm not going to tell you who they are, but I like all of them. This is nice to get 4 candidates where I want to talk to them and listen to their ideas. Sometimes I get 4 candidates and 2 or 3 of them, I'm like, oh, man, I don't want to talk to them, you know. So no. Thankfully, that's the only vacancy we have, and I can see that we fill it fairly quickly. But that is a good point, and folks, remember this. I have a budget that's appropriated to me by the legislature, and it's either approved or vetoed by the governor. I don't get a lot of money. I have law students, and they're probably these 2 attorneys can tell you that the average debt of an attorney getting out of law school now is between $60,000 to $150,000 in debt. Guess what? They come and work in New Mexico as a prosecutor. You know what they're starting at? 45. Teachers are making more. Teachers should, but they shouldn't make more than my people. But you know, teachers should make money. But you're going to pay off $150,000 on $45,000 a year, whether you know this or not. I have spent the last 12 years shoring up my budget, so I'm starting my people at 52, because that's the way to get them here, and that's one way to keep them here. I've even gone higher. I mean, try to go higher on these areas. I didn't have a lot of leeway because I was paying Leslie a very good salary, which she deserved. But once she retired, I had a little room to now take care of people to try and keep them here. But I told you before, there was a time when I didn't get a single applicant for Raton. 0. So I'll be right with you, but every year we beg for more money from the legislature, and I know they have their own concerns. The oil and gas revenues this year don't come in as like they thought. But until I can start getting my people paid, my attorneys paid, here's the reality, and it doesn't matter who's district attorney, you're going to see turnover. And any DA or anybody out there who's going to say that when I'm DA that won't happen, I think they're just spitting in the wind.
I think one of your problems has been the DA's office in Union County, and I imagine it's the salary. You say you have somebody to handle the cases. Is somebody stationed there?
Yes.
Or are they being handled from here?
Well, initially because I get interest in, sometimes in Clayton or in the position, and it's not the salary. I've paid Clayton pretty well to get people there. But what happens is someone works there and their spouse can't find a job, so they don't stay. Or someone works there and they realize that they're just not a rural type of person. Or someone works there and they just, for some reason, they just don't like Clayton.
Do you
I like
have
Clayton.
somebody there now?
I have someone who has been housed here in Raton. So what I did was I made a concession. I said, since the judge writes circuit to Clayton, I'll let the person live here and write circuit to Clayton, if that gives them the incentive. And so when I hired the Clayton prosecutor, named Bob Fitzgerald, he said, yeah, that'll work. But it looks like he may be actually moving to Clayton, so that'll solve that one. I'll be really happy if that happens. You know, Judge Paternoster gets there once a month, maybe twice. So there's not a lot of activity there. Magistrate court can be handled sometimes from here. And in Clayton, especially, I know I'm here to talk about Clayton, but Clayton, we've seen a lot of increase in caseload because of the prison. We've gotten a lot of prison cases. And so now having Bob over there, that's what he decides to do, is gonna help out quite a bit. Okay. Boring enough, folks? I know some of you guys are brave. You're hanging through this. All right, feel free to interrupt me with another question, but I'm gonna get on to what we can do, okay? I don't know if any of you here are familiar with what took place a few years back. My memory's not that great, but 3, 4, 5 years ago, when there was a group of citizens that was concerned about the drug issue, and we started meeting. We met a few times at the bank building. We met once at K-Bob's, and I made every single one of those meetings. Now, one of the things that came up was getting the commitment from this community to put together a board and let's establish a Crime Stoppers organization. There's no reason why Raton should not have a Crime Stoppers organization. They are very valuable. Cimarron has one. They were willing to help. Taos was willing to help establish one. Talk to your friends, talk to your neighbors. It's not a lot of commitment. In the beginning it is, but you have lots of help. The international Crime Stoppers, they'll send you to trainings. They'll do what needs to take place. I wish my memory was better, and these folks that were really into it, and they were talking about neighborhood watch programs, our chiefs here, our sheriffs here, they can talk to you about that and tell you about how effective those can be. But I'll tell you, a lot of the drug cases that we get in Taos start from Crime Stopper tips. We have solved murders with Crime Stopper tips. We have solved rapes, burglaries with Crime Stopper tips. You let the citizens become involved. They can do it anonymously, and then they get a little reward if we get a prosecution. So I'm more than willing, like I was the last time, and I'm here again, to help in any way I can. If it's facilitating the meetings, if it's making the introductions, I don't care what it is. And we don't need an answer tonight, but please talk to your friends, talk to your neighbors, and ask if anyone out there, maybe even some folks who may have a little time on their hands. I know a lot of our board members in Taos are retired or semi-retired, and they have the time to give it. But they are more than happy to come here and talk to you about it. Cimarron is more than happy. In fact, you guys use Cimarron on occasions, Chief? Yes. Yeah. It's such a close county, even though it's big geographically. A lot of stuff goes back and forth. You know that the guys peddling drugs in Cimarron are doing the same thing here, as far away as Springer. And we know that, and I just read a report just now about one person who's bringing in a lot of the marijuana from Colorado. Whether you think it's a bad thing or not, that's not the point. The problem is they're bringing them, they're selling them, and kids are getting a hold of it. So if you can, Robert, I don't know if you're interested. You're probably a good guy to be on the board.
I wanted to make this comment. People are probably getting tired of hearing about it. Crime Stoppers is a great program, okay? We don't have it here in Raton. The problem I have here in Raton, and I'm hoping it will change, is I call in. People have to realize sometimes a confident informant doesn't want to give their name, but they have the information. You call in now, the dispatcher asks you for your name, your address, your date of birth. They don't want to talk to that. The informant wants to talk, say, to the chief. The call should go directly to him without asking these questions. The information is there. They're willing to give it, but they're not willing to give their name. There's a lot of reasons why they don't want to give their name. But in time, if you had Crime Stoppers, they don't have to go through that process.
Exactly.
You get on there, you give the information, and it goes from there. But here, I wouldn't do it. I say, if I wanted to talk to the chief here again, name, address, date of birth, there's such a period in there, and I won't give the information. Hey, too bad, but Crime Stoppers is beneficial, and I'd like to see something in Raton get started like that, because our crime rate is going up. The city police, sheriff's department, state police are trying their best, but they have to have the community help them. But on the other hand, we have to have them help us by getting this information. Somebody may want to talk to Sergeant Valdez. You know, they shouldn't have to give all these questions out, and if you don't, well, I guess the call-in's there.
Well, the thing about it is, Mr. Gonzalez, it's procedural for dispatch. They're required to ask those questions. All the caller has to do is tell them that they would like to remain anonymous, and the dispatcher will send them through.
They won't give you the opportunity. I've tried several times, you know, and it doesn't work. As Crime Stoppers, like say, you don't have to go through that. You give them the information or they
Right.
assign you a number or something, that's it. You don't have to give names, addresses, date of birth.
Chief, does your Facebook have the potential for people to send in tips
Yes,
anonymously?
it does, but it
Okay.
identifies them as they send it in. Through private messaging, no one else.
Right, but no one will ever see that.
Correct.
You know, and here's, Mr. Gonzalez, I said you and I would agree on certain things, and we do. And Chief knows about it now, so I'm pretty confident that by the end of the week or so that some changes will be made, so if the word can be let out to the people. I don't have an investigator now, but I've always said that people, if they want to call into my office, can do so. We'll take the intel and we'll pass it along. That's what we do, we're a go-between. So if there's problems with dispatch or whatever technical things are happening, call my office, ask for my investigator. I've had people leave letters. I've had people send emails anonymous. They'll make up a name, and I pass those on. All those little, and that's my challenge. Let's get these things going. The other challenge I have, where we could use some help, is, and I know our policymakers will be there in Santa Fe, is let's talk to our elected officials, our representatives, our senators, our governor. And state police, for some reasons in the past, chose to dismantle their narcotics unit. They used to do some really good work. I'd like to see the narcotics unit brought back. And that's something only the governor can. So those of you folks, you vote, you're involved, get on the phone, get on the email to the governor's office, get on the phone and email to Senator Campos and Representative Roche, is it Roche? Roche, yeah.
Mr. Gallegos, I'd like to bring up another point, and you made it right here, okay? The legislative session is coming up. Representative Roach came up here and talked to us. Our state senator, Pete Campos, did not come up here. I personally wrote him a letter.
Okay.
Come up here and see what our needs are, okay? He hasn't responded to that. I think some of the city leaders have tried to contact him. He doesn't return phone calls. That's the problem we have here. You know, you say do this. Well, we're trying, but they're not helping us. These are our state representatives and state senators. But yet when election time comes around, here they are. I need your vote. I need your vote. I need his input into the legislature now, and he hasn't done anything about it.
Yeah, it's hard, I can't even answer that because I can tell you this, whether you like it or disagree with it, usually, I think on occasion I didn't answer your letter back, but usually I do get back to you. It may not be what you want to hear. I worked with Senator Campos. I've asked him for certain stuff here in Colfax County, and he's been very cooperative. I can tell you that if there's any message you want me to deliver, since I'll be there, I know his staff persons.
Well, we'd like for him to come up here to the legislative session.
I doubt he'll come during the
Colfax
session.
County has needs that they need to know to represent us, but we're like the orphan child up here. Nobody cares about us.
Well, usually what the senator, usually what the senator relies on too is our commissioners. And I know that you give them their concerns, they'll carry them over there. I can't tell you that I mean, I'd like to see it better, but I don't know what else to tell you on
I'd just
that.
like to see a little bit, have him come up here once and say, hey, meet with the city commission, county commission, and say, what are your needs? What can I do for you?
I don't
It's not
disagree.
your responsibility, I realize that. But since you brought up the point, get a hold of them, we have tried, letters, phone calls are not returned, so what good is it?
Well, I'm more than happy to relay that message. I won't say who said it, but I'll tell them, you know what, you need to get up to Colfax if you can and talk to those folks. The other thing is, you've got the media here. Why can't you write the letters to the media? I know they write them about me all the time, heck, write them. I mean, that's the way it should be. So write it and say, this is an open letter to Senator Campos, and I want it printed because, I'll tell you what, senators may not have paid a lot of attention to, because they're so busy, but when they see an article in the paper, they pay attention. Those are some suggestions I have. I wish you guys, the other thing is, I was going to request that you open up some kind of a resort spa or something to help keep my lawyers here, or some other incentive to keep them here, but I know I'm just messing with that. But there you go. I got a commitment over here. Resort spa, hot tub, pool. Okay, good. They get a lot. They're under a lot of stress, I don't know that I have a whole lot else. thankfully, I know you get tired of listening to me, that's just the way it is, but chief or any representatives from the sheriff, state police, if there's anything you guys want to talk about real quick, and then maybe we can wrap it up.
Hello, everyone. I'm John Garcia. I'm the newly appointed chief as of yesterday. Thank you all very much. We're in transition right now. We've got fresh blood inside the PD. We've got fresh blood inside the sheriff's office. I've not been able to meet with the sheriff, unfortunately. We spoke today. We're planning a meeting to get together on how to attack the major problem in this community, which is the drug problem. We definitely want to attack that with vigor, but with intelligence. We need to be smart about it. It is a dangerous time for law enforcement right now. Ambushes are on the rise. People are more apt and more brazen to pull out weapons on law enforcement. So we have to be very intelligent in the steps we take. I've also reached out to Las Vegas Police Department. They are the fiscal agent for the Region 4 Narcotics Task Force. Unfortunately, they only have 3 agents down there, and they have the entire northeast corner. So they are extremely busy, so we are going to try inside the PD, and I'm assuming the sheriff would like to apply as well, to get agents locally so we can draw from that fund, because obviously we have restricted budgets as well. So that's what we're looking at. If you have any questions for me, please feel free to stop by my office, Mr. Gonzalez, or give a call, please. Any questions? All right. Sure. Nope.
My spiel turned in my election.
Sure. Many years, and I believe that.
Yes, sir.
And I know we'll work together very well.
We're developing a game plan right now.
Okay.
And we're reaching out to some of the other communities. Other smaller communities are in transition as well, which is evident by they just appointed a new chief and so on. It's going to be a tough fight, but it's sure as heck when we can't fight. We can. I like to fight personally. And I think that my guys do as well. We might not win the battle, but we're going to fight the fight. I guarantee you.
Good. I think that's a great note, and I'm committed to fighting with you.
I know you are, sir, and I appreciate it.
State police, anything, or?
When you're concerned about the narcotics, the only thing I can suggest, and I will reach out to the higher-ups with the state police, is to see if maybe we can get a task force up here, because there is a task force, however, there are different areas that they concentrate their efforts in. However, if we can reach out to them and let them know that there is an issue in Raton and Colfax County, that we can assist you or assist the other departments.
A few years back in the Peñasco area, they were they still are. And one of the things one of the participants suggested a petition drive, and I said, well, petitions aren't really paid attention to by anybody. They're really not. So they started a letter writing campaign. It got to the governor, and the governor sent someone to meet with them. There was then a change in leadership, and nothing got off the ground, but there was a response from the governor. So I believe I've known her, I've worked with her many years, I know she's concerned about the communities. I believe that if she doesn't look at it directly, her staff will. It doesn't have to be that long, 2 paragraphs. It could just be, hey, I'm Joe Citizen here, we need help. We're drowning in the drug problem and its related effects. So that's one thing. I have a couple more, as Chief and Sheriff were talking, bring those up. We also have representation of our adult probation office over here. So and that brings up one stat that I wanted to highlight. What we found out when we went back, a lot of the dismissals that were happening, and some of you heard Billy on the radio ask me about 400 dismissals. Well, I think that was a mistake. There was no 400 dismissals. I gave you the numbers. But what we found out was happening, going back and looking at the cases, is when someone's on probation and they commit a violation, let's say they do a dirty urine test, or they break curfew, or they travel out of town, or they incur another violation, they file a petition to revoke probation, and we get them back into court, where they're either put back on probation or they're sent to prison, or a combination of both. Well, what would happen was John Doe would break probation, adult probation would send us a report, we would file. And then John Doe would commit 2, 3, 4 other ones, and they would send them to us as addendums to that probation violation. What we were doing was opening cases for each one of those. And then when we found out that there was just this one case, but these different violations, we dismissed those 4 or 5. And those showed up as dismissals because that's the only thing we could do. So all it was, what do they call it in Washington? Fuzzy math or accounting error or something? That's what it was. So that was another thing we discovered in going back and reevaluating. I think Esteban will tell you that's what it was. It was just cases being opened on addendums that should have just been one case. Okay? And I'll tell you that on those probation cases that they did have, the numbers were, we found 136, 86 of those were what we call adjudicated, or what you could call also convicted. So it's not this big crisis that some have been led to believe. It's just not that. And as you've seen, we're on solid ground. We're moving forward. A couple more things. When you think about the criminal justice system, you cannot just look at the DA. You cannot just look at the police officers. There's more to it. What are our judges doing? A lot of people have called me and said, nobody's going to jail, nobody's going to prison, they're all out. Well, I don't send people to prison. I don't send people to jail. Our judges do, or they don't. So we need to get educated. We ask for prison time. Here's the dilemma. Some of our judges, and not just in this county, don't want to send someone to prison just because they're an addict. I understand that, and guess what? I agree with that. Problem is, there's no adequate treatment. So here's what I'm left with, and the police know this very well because they get mad at me when the guy's back on the street stealing your stuff. Because there's no effective treatment, only thing I can do is ask that they be put in jail or prison. Not because that's the best place for them, but because if they're in jail or prison, they're not stealing your stuff. They're not hurting anybody. They're not hurting themselves. So unless this state commits to some kind of real reform in adequate treatment for meth and everything else, you're going to get warehousing. And that brings me to the other point. Our commissioners do what they can. They're very good. They're very dedicated. I've been honored to work with them. But jail costs are eating the county alive, and that means it's eating you guys alive because these come out of your pocket. So the citizens are saying we want them in jail. The jail's saying we got no room. Our commissioners are saying it's costing us. We're breaking the bank. And then we're transporting out. And that's putting stress on the sheriff's office. And that's breaking the bank. So you can't look at it just as cops, district attorney. You got to look at what are the judges doing, what are they not doing. I'm sure they have their reasons for doing what they do. I respect them. They're dedicated to serving the community. But sometimes a meth head, I hate to depersonalize it, but sometimes a mether does belong in prison because if they're not in prison, they're causing more trouble. And I think most everybody in this room agrees that if we can have good treatment, that's where they need to be. I'm all for it. And we got a defense attorney in here, and if she asks me today, is it okay to send my guy? All he is a meth head. Can we send him to treatment? If she finds that treatment, more than likely I'm going to agree to that. If it's a good, effective treatment, that'll help them turn their lives around. But if there's no treatment, then I have to say, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I can't take the risk to the community to let this person out. Just on a side note, Arizona and a couple of other states did studies because one of the big arguments is that jail and prison costs are breaking the bank, and they are. But that the economic cost is so overwhelming. Well, Arizona, Kentucky, a couple of other states did. And they found that the economic cost to the community in a lot of instances is greater when these people are not in prison. Because when your house gets broken into, you've lost that TV and your precious jewelry, chief's people are on overtime because they gotta stay investigating. Dispatch is on overtime, wear and tear on cars, equipment. It gets to my office, my staff is working, judges are working, juries get called in. So the economic impact sometimes of not having them locked up is a lot greater. And I'm not an advocate of locking them up, but I need to make that clear, but we need alternatives. And when you talk, and I'm hoping you do, speak with your representatives, say, we need good, effective treatment. Okay, jail, judge. I have one more courts, and I'm not sure. I think that's the same thing as the judge. I think that's it. So, any other questions, concerns? I have the forms. Lisa has them. If anybody wants one, raise your hand. I'm more than happy to pass them out. You can leave your name, contact information, and then a comment that you have. You want to, is it Mr. Montoya, I'm guessing? If you want to meet, just give us a couple of weeks to get someone on board and then give us a call. And Chief's already given the invitation for you to meet with him too. That's, or Mr. Gonzalez anyway. I'm not going to make his calendar for him. But, and other than that, I hope the next meeting is more people. I'd like to do it April or May. But by that time, can you at least get with the chief, if not me, Megan or Tim, and say that you do have some people that are interested in starting the Crime Stoppers program. If you guys can at least make that commitment, that's a heck of a start. And my commitment again is to post statistics on my website, and if Chief will share them, I'll get them on his site. And I guess we'll go from there. Thank you, folks. Thanks, appreciate your patience.